It's safe to say that we are in the dog days of Dynasty Summer. It's really tough when you are lacking information and things to really depend on or things to give you that advantage. Well, luckily, with Fantasy Points, we have people like Ryan Heath and Jakob Sanderson who spend all of their time trying to find you the greatest edge in Dynasty Fantasy Football, and we have it. Ryan Heath wrote the 2026 new play callers article, Fantasy Football Impacts, and we thought, how can we use this for Dynasty? That's what we're doing today. This is Dynasty Points, and it starts right now. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Dynasty Points. Joining us in our small corner of the Dynasty Fantasy Football landscape, and we are, again, working towards helping you make the best decisions possible. And how can we do that? Well, by leaning on guys like Ryan Heath, who wrote a phenomenal article, came out July 9th. It's must read. You can do that at fantasypoints.com. Paywalled now, but it is more than worth the price of entry. Ryan, we tasked you with finding 5 players, 5 things that we should care about with new play callers to help dynasty managers. So I'm going to send it to you.
Yeah, thanks. I will do my best. So the first guy that I want to really talk about is Quinshon Judkins, with Todd Monken being the new play caller for the Browns this year. The biggest thing to me with Monken when I evaluate him is just recently he has had one of the most efficient offenses in the NFL. Of course, Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry help with that a ton. But really, his entire resume is very impressive. Back-to-back national championships at Georgia, had an extremely fantasy-friendly offense with the Buccaneers back in the day. Monken has just kind of done it all. He's been great for us in fantasy football. And in theory, it should be really strong or really bullish or really good for a player like Quinshon Judkins to be attached to Monken. I like any player that is attached to a play caller like this. So that is kind of driving me to be higher on Judkins in Dynasty. But I guess kind of the interesting wrinkle and what I want to kind of pose to Jacob and pose to everybody here is I am in on Quinshon Judkins because of Monken in Dynasty. I'm ahead of consensus on him in Dynasty. But I'm not in redraft this year, which is not something that I try to do often, like being in on a guy in Dynasty, out in redraft. Usually those two things overlap. But I think this is one case where it might not, or it might not need to. My biggest issue is that the Browns this year, regardless of how good Monken is long-term, are not expected to have a very strong offense and are not expected to win very many games. And that's a real problem for a player like Judkins, who, at least to me, projects as much more of a 2-down type of running back. If we look at Monken's history, he has often used a primary runner and a primary receiver in his backfields. They've always been separate players. He's never had the same running back lead in attempts per game and targets per game. And that goes back all the way to his days with the Buccaneers. We have all of these on screen here that the viewers can watch on YouTube. But I think there can be a similar setup here this year with Dylan Sampson, who just had one of the most efficient receiving seasons of any rookie running back over the past 5 years. So there's kind of a natural split here. And that's really bad for a 2-down runner like Judkins on a team not projected to win many games. It's going to be a lot of negative game script. I just don't know that Judkins can hit the really high outcome that we want him to in 2026. But this is kind of how I would square the circle. I would say that kind of regardless of what happens this year, whether Judkins overperforms ADP expectation or not, very likely we're going into 2027 where the Browns have a top 5 pick. They probably add their quarterback of the future. And then we flip the page and suddenly Judkins is still a 2-down back, most likely, but on an offense we actually might be excited about, with a play caller we're excited about, with a rookie quarterback that we're potentially excited about. So I kind of think you can't lose. He either overperforms this year and his dynasty value stays high or goes up, or he just gets like really strong offseason indicators coming up this next offseason. So yeah, I'm just interested in what you think about this, Jacob. Am I just a fool for kind of trying to have 1 foot in and 1 foot out, not just being in on Judkins this year, but like, kind of hedging in Dynasty like that? Or does this thought process make sense to you? And do you have like other thoughts on Judkins as a Dynasty asset or Monken himself?
Yeah, I mean, on a zoomed out view, I don't think there's anything wrong with necessarily having some players that you're higher on in Dynasty than in redraft. I don't try to get too bogged down into the idea of market timing, where like I might like a guy at his cost now in Dynasty, but I think maybe I could get him cheaper because I don't like how he's going to play this year. That to me has just never really been how I operate. I think you try your best to view it as two separate markets, and sometimes those markets aren't perfectly efficiently aligned, and you do have to be more in on someone in one format than the other. Looking at Judkins specifically in this offense, I'll echo all your thoughts on Todd Monken. I've always thought he was a really strong play caller. Tom's, of course, very familiar with him as a play caller, having been watching the Ravens closely for the last few years. I've been a huge Todd Monken fan dating back to the Bucs, dating back to Georgia. So I'm excited to see what he can do with this Browns offense, especially if he remains the coach next year. Maybe they have better quarterback play. I've been like not crazy in on, but like a little above the market on Judkins in both Dynasty and in redraft this year. He goes in a range in redraft with like a big lot of running backs. I'm curious, when you say you're not as in on him, who exactly you're taking over him or taking him over? Because there's that big group there basically from Trevion and Montgomery and Bucky Irving and DeAndre Swift and Quinshon Judkins and Bashal Tutin, and maybe I'm missing one, but it's a huge group. And I have Judkins probably towards the front end of that group because I think he is one of the better combinations of a legitimate talent upside bet as a year 2 player with a lot of juice, and of a guy that I'm just 100% sure, like if he's healthy, he's getting 250 carries this year. Maybe that there's an element to which those aren't the most valuable carries in the world, but at least it is a locked-in volume floor with an intriguing talent. The one thing I'll say, if you want to be more optimistic on Judkins, it's like, yeah, if I was projecting this out in my Excel sheet and I was projecting the most likely scenario, I would put Dylan Sampson in for most of the passing situations. But I don't know that it's like super, super clear. We didn't have that much of a sample of Sampson playing in strict passing situations last year. If you go through the very first game of the year, obviously Judkins didn't play. Ford was playing most of those spots. Sampson was racking up a ton of volume as an early down receiving option. And then once Judkins came back, Ford for a while was still playing a lot of the designated pass down snaps. Sampson started cutting into that a little bit more as the year went on. But then he also got hurt himself, and he didn't play as much over the second half of the year due to injury. Some of the target stuff that I've seen on Sampson, I think I'm like half in and half out on believing it. Half in because just watching him last year and in college, of course, go Vols. I always thought he had untapped potential as a pass catcher coming out. I thought that he looked really fluid as a pass catcher last season. I think that if they use him in that role, he'll continue to succeed. I do think some of the stats is a little bit elevated by a couple of kind of small sample-y things. The first week when Sampson basically got to be the lead back because Judkins was still out, was with Flacco, and Flacco just threw to him repeatedly, like over and over and over again. I think he had like 8 or 9 catches in that very first game. Fannin had a similar level of short area spam. It just seemed like the Bengals were giving the Browns anything they wanted within 10 yards, and Joe Flacco obviously is more than willing to pepper that repeatedly. And then where a lot of the efficiency comes from is he had like one 50 or 60 yard screen pass against the Raiders in, I think it was Shadur's first start.
Week
and
12,
so
yep.
like how much of Sampson's total passing game, like targets per route run, yards per route run profile is like one game where he got hyper targeted with Flacco and one screen pass. Like when we're dealing with, I think like in the mid 30s numbers of targets, that counts for a lot. It's not like we're dealing with like an 80 target sample. So I'm not saying he didn't earn that. He looked really good in that first game in the passing game, and he obviously made an incredible play on that screen pass. But I do think it's maybe a little bit overstated the degree to which he's some locked-in guy. Like coming out of college, this was not a Jahmyr Gibbs receiving profile. This was like a very run-of-the-mill receiving profile, not that dissimilar to Quinshon Judkins, who also had like a very could go either way type college receiving profile. I thought Samson had some untapped potential there. He showed that year one, but I think if Judkins plays like a superstar, he could take on more of the passing down work than maybe we assume.
Well, even if you look at Judkins towards the end of the year last year, he was getting a little bit more run in the pass. 3 targets, 1 target, 2, and then 5 in that Buffalo game. He ended up getting hurt in. So he showed that he could do it a little bit. And remember, we mentioned it on last week's episode. We were talking about sleepers because I like Samson as a nice little sleeper, but only 4 more targets than Judkins in 1 fewer game played and 8, as you mentioned, peppered by Flacco. So you're right, there is some risk there. That's why I'm more in on Judkins. I think he can have that complete profile, but there was the article that came out that said he does need to learn how to play on passing down. So I don't know if that's just off-season coach speak or they just don't want to gas him up a little bit too much, really make him earn it. You know how coaches can be. We'll see, but I'm 100% with you, Ryan, that it really doesn't matter what happens this year because all eyes are towards 2027.
I guess what I could see for Judkins, like at an apex, is like I think back to like Titans, Derrick Henry usage. I'm not comparing him to Henry as a player, obviously. It's not
heard it here first. Quinshon Judkins is like Derrick Henry.
Jonathan Taylor gets some of this too, where like they're, and obviously Judkins has to prove himself to be like a real star level talent for this to apply. But there's an element to which when those guys get into like a normal game, they typically never play the strict passing down situations. That's where you find them some snaps off. But in games that they trail, teams use them more in passing situations than they normally would because they're like, well, this is our best player, and we're not just going to not use him in the entire second half because we're in comeback mode. And like that's what I would be hoping for Judkins, that like on a regular 3rd and 8, you know, it's Samson. But I'm hopeful that when they're in negative game script, because they're going to often be a negative game script, that they're willing to be like, no, we're not going to let ourselves get game scripted out of using our best player. And I think largely that has something to do with the coach, but I think it has the most to do with Samson himself. Is can he assert himself as such a good player that he's worthy of that type of fluid treatment? We'll find out.
Yeah, I can definitely see early Raiders Josh Jacobs level, 30-some receptions, 40-some targets, and 270, 240 carries, like you said. And that's still going to be really solid in 26, let alone 27.
Yeah, there's definitely a world where it's enough of a pass catching role for Judkins. I don't mean to preclude that possibility. But yeah, based on the Monken tendencies I just outlined, I tend to think it will be Samson this year. But yeah, fully agree that like especially in Dynasty where we can just kind of find out, actually he's going to be more of a pass catcher than we were projecting based on his rookie season. Like I agree that that's still a little bit unclear, and that does make him a little more attractive of a bet. I just because you asked, Jacob, I would say the 2 guys that go behind him pretty consistently that I'm more in on this year from like a redraft perspective would be DeAndre Swift and Bashal Tutin, both basically for similar offensive environment reasons. And Tutin, I think, also has a little bid of an element of he could catch more passes than people are projecting kind of similarly. But yeah, that's where I'm at on Judkins and Monken. So good discussion there. The next guy I want to bring up is someone that is close to all of our hearts in Dynasty circles. It's Marvin Harrison Jr. Getting Mike LaFleur.
My guy this year.
Yeah,
First
Jacob's
time.
guy.
Finally,
My
3
boy.
years. 3 years it took.
Yeah.
Getting Mike LaFleur as his new play
Good thing
caller.
that he's not been my boy yet. So
Yeah. It always feels like it gives you a little bit of extra credibility to be able to say, I have not been in on this guy until now. Like that.
It's fun to do it's fun to do the dump and pump.
Yes. So I'm in kind of a similar situation, or at least I'd like to be, based on some of these play calling notes that, yeah, I'm curious kind of what you guys make of this. I think the conventional wisdom on the Cardinals and on LaFleur this year is that they're going to want to be very slow paced and run heavy. They have spent all of their draft capital and free agent money on running backs, on guards. So that's like a fair enough conclusion that a lot of people have drawn. But what I would point out is that LaFleur was not really happy to just sit and lose games and run over and over when he was with the Jets a few seasons ago as their OC calling plays, right? So if you just remove any game that Zach Wilson started, we are left with 12 starts between Joe Flacco and Mike White over 2 seasons. In those games, the Jets averaged over 300 passing yards per game, which was more than any team in the NFL last year. LaFleur had a 60% pass rate over those 2 seasons overall, which would rank 6th highest among all play callers over the past 5 years. Top 6 in pace as well. Like, he really showed a willingness to unleash these more veteran quarterbacks, the non-Zach Wilsons, into these negative game scripts to put up a ton of drop back volume and to kind of field a more respectable offense via that route. Not dissimilar from what the Cardinals did last year. So I'm not saying that the Cardinals or Jacoby Brissett are going to lead the NFL by far in PRO or in dropbacks per game again. I'm more saying that there's a world where this is not a run-heavy offense. There's a world where, at least for part of the season, when it's not Carson Beck starting, that they are legitimately like at least a pass-leaning team. And that, to me, is most applicable to Marvin Harrison Jr. just based on where the ADPs are. Trey McBride is quite expensive across all formats. Harrison really is not, though, going outside round 5, round 6 in Dynasty and Redraft alike, right? So that when you just look at his splits with Brissett last year, it's 3 full games, 18.7 expected fantasy points per game. That would be a top 4 mark at the receiver position. 14.9 fantasy points per game, a top 12 mark. Of course, those are a little inflated by the drop back volume we just talked about, but even the share stats were really strong just in that sample. In those 3 games, he had a higher first read target share than Trey McBride. He was up at 38%, would have been a top 4 mark. That's pretty crazy considering the year McBride just had, one of the best tight end seasons we've ever seen. Harrison was alphaing him, at least in those 3 games that they were healthy together with Jacoby Brissett. So there's like, I always feel like I'm copping out when I say, oh, there's a world where this happens, but I think it's decently likely, like 40% chance that Harrison is just the leading receiver on this team. I think you layer that with the chance that this is actually a high drop back volume team, and you can suddenly draft like one of the most impressive analytical wide receiver prospects of the last decade going into year 3 at like a pretty cheap ADP in all formats. Like that like gets me kind of excited. I guess where I really have trouble sorting it out, and what I want to hear your guys' opinion on is this a better bet than the younger receivers that have like legitimately flashed more than 3 games of production in the NFL? I'm thinking of the Luther Burdens, the Lad McConkeys, the Emeka Egbukas, like these types of receivers where, depending on the format, Harrison might go ahead of or behind them. But that's kind of just the range that I'm trying to sort out my Marvin Harrison thoughts in right now. So I'll turn it over to you, Jacob. I've talked for a while, but yeah, just any thoughts that you have to bounce off that.
I mean, I think Marvin Harrison Jr. is the number 1 buy in Dynasty right now. And not because I like him better than those 3 guys you mentioned, but because at least based on anything I've seen, he's substantially cheaper than those 3 guys that you named, especially Burden and Egbuka. I think that before I get into the micro stuff, like about LaFleur and Harrison, just from a macro level, you wouldn't believe it based on the way these 2 get talked about, but like 2 of the top 10 pick wide receivers in 2024, Marvin Harrison Jr. like clearly ahead in career yards per route run over Rome Odunze to this point, up over 1.5 for Harrison, 1.33 for Odunze. And it's interesting to me that, one of them is still talked about very favorably. There's a lot of context given for any of the reasonable excuses that he has. Harrison, I feel like people are just willing to put into the dustbin. And I think it's largely because people had higher expectations for Harrison. But like, that makes sense psychologically. But like realistically, if we're talking about what do we expect going forward, would you rather have a guy who's been more disappointing, but who you have more reason to think is good, or a guy who's disappointed you less because you had lower expectations, but like also you still have less to work with? Like I'm going to get over the disappointment, and I'm going to bet on the guy who I have more elite ceiling indicators in the profile of. And to me, that's clearly Harrison. I'm not going to say that like he had excuses that completely cover everything he did in his first 2 years. I don't. I was generally out on him for much of those first 2 years, and I think most of the issues were him not playing very well. But I think that we have seen countless examples of players who have just taken a little bit longer to get to their peak as players. And I think that is like almost the last frontier to me of young upside that is not priced in, is just betting on players to play better, like and particularly betting on good prospects to show why they were good prospects, even if it takes them a little bit longer than you want them to. Because I tweeted about this earlier today. I feel like the market is now very willing to bet on production they haven't seen yet, if there's like a straightforward case for it. Like I keep bringing up the ADPs this year in both Dynasty and Redraft, honestly, of like Luther Burden and Trevion Henderson, because these are both guys who like take a pretty big leap of faith going into year 2 based on the fact that there's significant competition from teammates for touches, and that the raw production, or especially in Henderson's case, the production while Stevenson was active is nowhere close to what you're drafting now. But I think there was enough signs people feel good about the talent. They're like, oh, well, if Burden just gets more routes and he's ahead of Odunze in the pecking order, or if Henderson just gets more snaps, people already feel comfortable with the talent and translating it forward. It's a little tougher to make like a logical case for Harrison, because you have to just say, well, if he's way better than he was, is kind of what we need him to do. And I guess I'm just betting on that there's a pretty good chance that a guy who was one of the best wide receiver prospects of all time and hasn't really played up to that level yet will just get better over time. Like a lot of these other big physical outside X receivers have taken a little extra time. We saw Nico break out in year 3. We saw Pickens have like a partial breakout in year 3 and a massive breakout in year 4. And the Michael LaFleur of it all just gets me more bullish on a bet that I was already pretty interested in making anyways. You mentioned people think he might be slow and boring. His brother is slow and boring. But like he is uniquely a person who's come from both sides of the McShanahan tree. And yeah, a lot of the Shanahan side of the tree do tend to be slow pace and run heavy. The Mick side of the tree mostly doesn't. That's Zach Taylor, who throws it constantly. Kevin O'Connell is when he doesn't have J.J. McCarthy, typically pretty pass happy. Liam Cohen has led 2 consecutive top 10 P-row offenses. And like you mentioned, Mike LaFleur with the Jets, I thought ran a pretty dynamic offense and a really competitive offense. So I'm excited to see what he does. I definitely, like I said, I don't think that like Harrison's usage or Kyler was the only issue with his first 2 years, but it didn't help that he was constantly posted up at this really static position in the offense. He had this really limited quarterback trying to throw him the ball in a way that didn't really fit. And I definitely think if he gets more dynamic usage with LaFleur and a better quarterback pairing, that there's going to be an easier opportunity for him to play ball. So I'm super in on Marvin Harrison. I think he's a big buy, and the LaFleur thing is a big part of that.
Yeah, couldn't have said it better than myself, honestly. I think, especially in Dynasty, this is like a very straightforward type of bet. I pretty much just fully agree. Yeah, we'll see where I end up ranking him in my redraft draft guide based on ADPs around different sites. But yeah, he's a guy I'm giving a lot of thought to, even just immediately in 2026.
I'm more I'm more in him in Dynasty than in redraft because I think that the payoff is so much larger. Where like he's a guy where I know he's been disappointing, but like if we can all just be like reasonable people, he's already played well enough for 2 years as a young player that I don't think he's like falling out of the NFL bad. Okay, like this isn't Treylon Burks, right? Like he's gonna be in the NFL for a while. He has real skill sets. So to me, if like the worst case scenario is he bounces around like somewhere between a Romeo Doubs career or a Cortland Sutton career, like he's still worth a 2, at the end of the year, even if that's what we know he is. And if all of a sudden we see a huge breakout, he could be worth a first and a half or 2 firsts. And I mean, as much as everyone hates him right now, if he comes out and he averages 17 points per game for the first 4 weeks, everyone's right back in. Everyone's remembering, he's the prince who was promised again. Like people are going to have real short memories about the mean tweets that they said about him in the meantime. And so I think that just the asymmetric upside on the price, where like if you can get him in like the late first value range, you're not losing that much if he's just whatever, and you could gain a lot. Redraft, I still have him way out of market. Like I just did my FFPC main event rankings yesterday. I have him at 61, so right at the 5-6 turn. He goes toward the end of the 6th. I'm ahead of him on all formats, but Dynasty is, I just think, where you get the biggest payoff.
Yeah, great points all around. Sorry, Tom, do you want to go?
Yeah, I was just going to say a lot of the reasons like people want to be so quick to be out on him entirely, regardless of price, is because what's on the screen. A lot of the wide receiver boys, like guys that we really play Dynasty a lot with, were pre-clicking Marvin. We've talked about Jeremiah Smith and how he's going to go number 1 in Dynasty rookie drafts already. That was Marv. His ADP shows Caleb being ahead of him, but in 90% of the leagues I was in, even if teams needed a quarter, I watched guys whose Dynasty QB2 was Andy Dalton run as fast as they could, decline every trade to take Marvin Harrison. That's the type of hype he was getting, which is why, like Jacob mentioned, the disappointment is so strong. The stink is so heavy. Look at the guys that go behind him. Daniels already gave you a smash season. Neighbors did. Rome is carried. Drake May just went to a Super Bowl. Skip 7. Brock Bowers is awesome. Skip Worthy. Brooks is getting re-steamed again. BTJ had one of the best rookie seasons of all time, and so did Lad McConkey. Bo Nix was the number 1 seed in the AFC. Like, watching how his peers that got drafted around him performed makes his disappointment stand out. Everything you guys said is absolutely true. If he comes out and gives you guys those first 3 weeks, all is forgotten. The hope is back. It's hashtag year 3 breakout for Ohio State wide receiver season, more than reasonably priced. It's just this ADP. This is why that stink hurts so bad for so many people.
All right, let's move into my third play caller and player pairing. Let's talk about Zach Robinson and what he's going to do with the Buccaneers. So the biggest thing that jumps out in terms of Zach Robinson as a play caller the past couple of years has been motion at the snap or during snap motion. He has used it more often than any other play caller outside of Mike McDaniel over the past 5 years. He has done it at nearly twice the rate on his dropbacks as former Buccaneers play caller Josh Grizzard from last year. So this is going to be a big change in Tampa. A lot more motion at the snap. We have seen this be just generally an efficiency cheat code, get about a 43% per route fantasy production boost from all players on the field, just if anywhere during snap motion is used. And specifically for Baker Mayfield, as we talked about last week, it's been a very big boost, about a 50% adjusted net yards per attempt boost with motion at the snap. So really my question here is, which receiver do we pick as the beneficiary in case the Buccaneers offense kind of takes off again with Robinson for this type of reason? So my first instinct was Chris Godwin. So Chris Godwin has been one of the most productive receivers for any like during snap motion type of player over the past couple of seasons. 3rd in yards per route run with motion at the snap since 2024, behind only Puka Nacua and Nico Collins. Even last year when he was playing extremely injured, he ranked second in yards per out run with motion at the snap on a smaller sample, but still over 4 yards per out run in any split or context for Chris Godwin last year is pretty eye-popping to me. So you add into that Zach Robinson coached with Liam Cohen for a long time. They talk on the phone together every week, apparently, with Cohen having really brought Baker and Chris Godwin's fantasy production in 2024 to another level. The immediate take that I want to have is, wow, Chris Godwin to the moon, like perfect, cheap dynasty buy, bounce back candidate. And I do feel that way. That's everything I'm about to say after this does not take away from that case I just made for Godwin. I believe that regardless. But then I get to thinking, and it's like, well, Emeka Egbuka is right here. He's going into year 2 after, through his first 5 games, accumulating the 3rd most fantasy points of any rookie wide receiver ever through an initial 5 games. Or sorry, 3rd on that list, behind Puka Nacua and Randy Moss since the 80s. So one of the best we've ever seen over his first 5 weeks. Gets injured, has a hamstring injury in week 6. Baker Mayfield also has more injuries racking up in week 6 and week 7. The volume stays about the same for Egbuka. The efficiency goes way down. He goes from way overperforming his volume to way underperforming his volume. But it's all like pretty easily hand-waved by the injury angle that I just covered, in my opinion. So I'm left with, well, this is a player who came a first-round pick with a pretty decent college profile to come out of the gate extremely hot, cool off because of injuries. And now am I really just making like a very specific motion-based case for his 30-plus-year-old teammate? Like, what if I right now am just about to buy like the Seahawks version of Cooper Kupp last year instead of touting the Jackson Smith and Jigba that's about to take off, the Emeka Egbuka? So it's more like kind of regardless of where I land on Egbuka, which I can say at the end of this after you guys talk and give me your thoughts. It's more like I'm just trying to audit my thoughts here and make sure, am I not just focusing on only the old guy in this offense? Am I being open enough to the upside for that could similarly apply? I mean, Egbuka was also very efficient during snap motion last year, over 2.4 yards per out run on those plays. So yeah, I want to just hear you, Jacob, kind of reflect on the Buccaneers passing game, Egbuka versus Chris Godwin, and any ways that you think Zach Robinson or the case I just laid out could tie in here.
So I'm a little bit, I've been just kind of confused with the Bucs team all year.
Yeah.
I think that, like, first of all, like, just every person in the world just thinks Baker Mayfield is better than I do. Like, so that's just the first thing. Like, I just think Baker Mayfield is like very average. And I will say he's like an extremely volatile average. Like, if you look over the course of his career, he's had at least 2 seasons where he's been like very clearly played at a top 10 level. Also had some seasons where he's played at like an unplayable level, and several in between. Like, I think really fondly of Liam Cohen. I don't view his 2024 season as a baseline for what to expect. I would say if I was to like put a baseline on who I think Baker Mayfield is, it'd probably be like his 2023 season with Canales is probably like the closest thing that I would come up with as like an average-ish, maybe a slightly better than average-ish Baker Mayfield season of what I would expect going forward. So like, to me, when I hear people like throw out the injury excuses for last year, I hear those. But I was already expecting him to probably look a lot worse last year than he did in 2024, simply because he lost Cohen and he never played that well before. He was like a 40 touchdown guy in 2024. And that was very different than who he's been for most of the rest of his career. So like immediately the ADPs came out this year on the Bucs, and I'm like, we got Baker at quarterback. We got our offensive coordinator just coming off of calling the 24th best offense in EPA per play. And like, I understand that their quarterback situation wasn't amazing, but like, this is still a team that had Drake London and Bijan Robinson. Like, I don't view that as some great accomplishment to get that team out to being a totally mid to below average offense. And I honestly like probably think a little more highly of Michael Penix than most people do at this point in his career. So like I don't think very highly of Mayfield, and I don't think very highly of Robinson. I will give credit to Robinson that he does a lot of the things that successful offensive coordinators do. So that's a positive. But like I made this comment pre-show. I think Zach Robinson is the closest thing we have in the NFL to like if someone made the really dumb decision of making me offensive coordinator, which is like I know like the things that you should do. So like I would do them. I would hit the play action button and hit the motion button, but like I don't know what I'm doing. I can't like design plays well. Like I could also like trace what other people do, but like my offense would be the worst in the NFL. Like I don't have a clue what I'm doing. Now Zach Robinson obviously is way better of an offensive coordinator than I am, but like that's kind of the metaphor of where I just don't necessarily buy that like the fact that he co-opts other people's smart ideas means that he necessarily has the goods himself. It's a little Bobby Slowik for me on Zach Robinson. So I just have kind of basically everything about this offense. I just think it's kind of average, and I'm just kind of confused by how in this ADP landscape it's like, oh, we need to draft one of their wide receivers in round 3, another one in round 7, and then another one in round 12, and also all 3 of their running backs need to be drafted, 2 of them in the top 100. I'm like, on the Bucs. Like, really? This is the offense we need to do this? Like, it's not the Chargers. It's not the Lions. So I've been confused by this team all offseason. That being said, if we assume everything's going to go well, and that Baker and Robinson are better than I'm giving them credit for, I think that probably Egbuka gets the first shot because he's the guy that they have investment in for the long term, right? He was their first round pick. He's probably a more talented player than, or at least has an upside of being a more talented player than Chris Godwin does today. Like, I think if you ask the Bucs organization, who would you prefer to be your 1,200-yard, 12-touchdown breakout candidate? Like, it's probably the 23-year-old Egbuka, not the 30-year-old Chris Godwin. I guess I'm just not convinced that he is, that like, making Egbuka the wide receiver 1 by fiat makes him a better pick than all of the other wide receivers going around him that I just buy into the talent case for more. Like, I've really tried to sell myself on him this year because it's a year 2 player. I feel really uncomfortable being underweight on a player like this that I think is pretty good. But like, I went back and I read my prospect article on him. I thought mostly favorably of him. But I thought he projected to probably be a fantasy wide receiver 2 for a long time, maybe wide receiver 3. Rookie season was like bizarrely sequenced. Everybody seems to be emphasizing the positives more than the negatives. But like on the whole, 1.75 yards per route run. Good. Very good rookie season. It's not like usually the type of rookie season that warrants like we're going to draft you in round 3 next year price. Like that's usually more of like a Zay Flowers, Jordan Addison type rookie season of like, congrats, like you're a starting NFL wide receiver. Let's see how it goes next year. And like I look at him, for instance, in the redraft market, and it's like, well, would I rather have a Egbuka or Jalen Waddle? And it's like, well, I know Jalen Waddle is a wide receiver 1, like as a talent, and they're going to make him that in roles. So it's like, can I just pick him? Like, why do I have to guess who the wide receiver 1 is and make this projection for Egbuka? Like, what upside am I getting on top of this? So I've really struggled with him, but I do think he probably has the best shot. I think Godwin's the guy I've drafted more, and it's not really because I think he's going to be the wide receiver 1. I just think he has some equity of doing it, and the opportunity cost with Godwin is so much lower that, like, especially in Dynasty, you can acquire him for a bag of chips. And like, if the offense is awesome and Egbuka is awesome, there's still a lot left over for Godwin to contribute as a weekly wide receiver 3 and flex player. And if the market is wrong and Egbuka is just not up to it, like maybe Godwin is the wide receiver 1, and then he's like one of the cheapest possible points buys you can get in Dynasty who's not even that old. So I've been playing it more through Godwin on price, not as much because I'm like convinced that Zach Robinson is going to design the whole thing around Godwin. I think he'd probably prefer to design it around Egbuka if Egbuka's up to it. So I'm really torn on Egbuka. I'm pretty into Godwin.
Yeah, I'm still very torn on him as well. I think where I most resonate with you is that I don't really, especially in Dynasty, I don't really understand why Egbuka carries like this massive price premium compared to a McConkey or a Burden or like any of these other guys. Like he's been pretty consistently just the most expensive of that group, and I don't see like a real reason why. So yeah, and yeah, like you're saying, it's not to say that he can't break out all over the place this year and take like a really big step forward. But it is just like I just feel like there's not as much juice left to squeeze at the ADP.
Do you guys feel like the way he's discussed now as a prospect, like in retrospect, is just very different than the way he was discussed as a prospect at the time? Like, because I've seen so many people be like do the next JSN thing with him, and a lot of it is like really good prospect. And I'm like, yeah, they were drafted similar in the NFL draft, but like if you remember the way JSN was discussed by the Dynasty community when he came out, it was like, this guy is unreal. He was the clear wide receiver one in his class for Dynasty. People were valuing him a ton immediately. He had this beautiful analytical profile. Like I felt like last year Egbuka was talked about like favorably, but never like some blue chip wide receiver one can't miss. Like the way he's talked about now, I feel like is like people are acting like him and McMillan were like, 1A, 1B coming out. And that was just never how he was perceived at the time. And then I felt like he got all of this positive buzz in training camp. He started red hot in September. And I feel like people, I don't know, there's like a primacy effect to that. It's just weird. I just am curious where the like evaluation of his talent, I feel like, changed in a way that's not necessarily reflected in the numbers, because I don't want it to come off like I think he sucks. I feel like I've been pretty consistent in how I view him, and I feel like the market has like been like, nope, this guy is like tier one, like goals. I'm like, since when? Like maybe in the future.
I think this has something to do with a little bit for confirmation bias, right? He comes out, he plays really well, he shows out, he can be a one. And Evans comes back, kind of change anything. Plus he gets hurt. That kind of changes everything. But seeing him produce made people go, oh, I was right about him being good as a prospect. And that overshadows any of the negative of it. It's just going back and altering the finality, I guess, of his prospect profile because now we've seen it. So I think that's a lot of that where it comes from. And now Mike Evans is gone. So now having Mike Evans gone is just like, oh, now they really believe in it. So now we're just adding on top of all the positive, which just makes you completely forget any of the separation stuff, any of the per route, like any of that is out the window because a lot of good in the profile. Then he showed out. Now they believe in him. You can just stack those things up and tell yourself. And then when you compare that to the quality of wide receiver prospect this year with him, it's like, oh, he's an Ohio State wide receiver.
Yes.
Again, I've said this forever. JSN has done immeasurable damage to how we view wide receivers in year 2 and year 3. And now everyone's compared to the next JSN. Everyone's the next JSN.
You're the next JSN.
I, at 37, could one day develop to be the next JSN with no knees anymore. You're absolutely correct.
Right.
But that's how these guys are viewed. And I feel like that's where it is way more upside, upside, upside. This can't go wrong. Even if he fails in year 2, don't worry, JSN broke out in year 3. So I feel like we're just kind of changing based on confirmation of the positives from the profile.
And he also has a good mix of like, to quote from my slapsis, like he has a good mix of both boomer and slappy tendencies where it's like everybody likes to bet on the sexy young guy and he's a year 2 player. But like he's also a year 2 player, like has a lot of like the things that boomers like going for him, where he's the wide receiver 1, and he plays with Baker, who is a quarterback that, is objectively in the top half of what you'd want for fantasy. But I think people think he's like a really good quarterback for fantasy. So I think it's like it's easy for people to be like, good offense, good quarterback, wide receiver 1. And it's like a very comfortable year 2 bet to make, I guess. Like, and the last thing I'll just say, because I know we're way too long, I want to be clear, like if anyone listens to this, that it's not as though I'm saying he's like bad. I don't think he's bad, and I've never thought he was bad. it's just like he's going at wide receiver 11 right now. Like his dynasty value is like interchangeable with Tetero McMillan's. And like McMillan was a way better prospect than him, like by a substantial margin. And everyone thought so at the time for the most part, and had a much more impressive rookie season than he did. And it's like, these guys should not be interchangeably valued. Like we should have to see a lot of what we're assuming is going to happen with Egbuka before these two are valued the same level. He's going ahead of both Carnell Tate and Jordan Tyson, who were top 10 picks in this year's draft that I think were also better prospects than he was, Tyson especially, and he's going multiple rounds behind. And he's going ahead of guys like Nico Collins, Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson. Like, these are all guys Zay Flowers, like a series of, like, you know, older. So I guess the value upside is lower, but like undisputable, you know, top 15, top 12 wide receiver talents in the NFL. So it's not like I'm saying, oh, this guy's a bust. Like, I think he will probably be a top 24 wide receiver this year, and I think he's going to have a very long, successful NFL career. My issue with him is purely just, like, I just don't think that his price right now matches what he's shown so far as a talent, and he obviously will have an opportunity to change that.
It's a desperation of needing the young wide receivers to hit at this point. I think there's serious potential for nesting doll tag in his future.
Yeah. The only thing I wanted to add to the excellent conversation that you guys just had is I really do think that it was the reevaluation of his profile came once we had to actually look at these 2026 rookie wide receivers. It was like very easy to make the comparison of, oh, wow, Emeka Egbuka was actually more efficient and more productive at Ohio State than Carnell Tate was. Like that just like jumped off the spreadsheets to me personally when I was doing my prospect work. So I do wonder if that is just part of it too. But yeah, largely agree with a lot of the points you guys just made. Let's move it over. Jacob mentioned Bobby Slowik in his last answer. Let's talk about Bobby Slowik. We've got Devon Achane that we do have to, unfortunately, because I am lower on Devon Achane in Dynasty than I feel comfortable, than I like to be. I have people like Scott Barrett telling me that I'm crazy for even worrying, and that Achane is he'll just be fine. Like, he's an amazing receiver. He'll just put up points. It doesn't matter. But I think Bobby Slowik is uniquely bad as a play caller for Achane, where the case is, yeah, maybe the Dolphins will be bad, but he'll catch a ton of passes and a ton of checkdowns. I don't know that that's the case looking at Slowik's history. So the biggest thing that jumps out is that Bobby Slowik seems to just want to get his offenses into third and long. And I don't mean that literally, but he coaches as if that's the goal. Just looking at in his 2 years in Houston, the offense had to drop back on third and long 224 times. That's the third most of any team over that span. You don't want to do that. This is one of the least efficient plays in football, a third and long drop back. But the reason they got there so much is because Slowik would just run at an incredibly high rate on second and long. And of course, the Texans had not that great of a run game to even come close to getting away with that. So really, just like over half the time, Bobby just kind of surrenders and says, whatever, we'll get into third and manageable, but really it's like 3rd and 6 or 3rd and 7 where you obviously have to drop back and the defense knows it and they can react accordingly, right? They can send as many blitzers as they want to. And I think that is a large part of why CJ Stroud had such awful like pressure to sack issues for a lot of his early career, just being in those situations. So long rant, but you transpose that onto a Malik Willis offense where Malik Willis, yes, can theoretically kind of play hero on third and long. He can scramble around. He can move the chains some of the time in those situations. But that's like not good for Devon Achane's passing volume, right? Willis has scrambled on 30% of his third and longs over the past 3 seasons. That's about double his scramble rate on all dropbacks. We're talking about Malik Willis, so these are small samples, but that also holds true generally across the NFL. QBs have a bit higher of a scramble rate on third and long. We already with Willis, when you just consider the scrambles, he has one of the lowest dropback conversion rates. A lot of his dropbacks turn into sacks, they turn into scrambles, they turn into throwaways. And he has averaged, like right around 20, 22 dropbacks per start in his career. So low volume passing offense on top of probably a lot of the passes will be out of third and long when Willis is going to be tempted to scramble and run for his life. That just equates to way fewer targets for Devon Achane. Like he's going to have to be up above a 25% target share potentially to even get to like 4 or 5 targets per game, which is basically required on this offense for him to be an RB1. So I just can't draft Devon Achane as like a top 4 or a top 5 dynasty running back. It doesn't make sense to me. He's unfortunately tied to this Miami team now with his extension for as long as they allow this to continue. You hope it's not past 2026 if it is indeed a total disaster, but it wouldn't be that crazy for Slowik or Willis to get a second season and for this to kind of extend another year into 2027. We're just eating up more and more of Devon Achane's prime as this conversation goes on. So I don't know. I have moved him down to, I believe he's my dynasty RB6. I've had him in the 6 to 8 range throughout this offseason, kind of going back and forth as I argue with myself on this. But yeah, I'm below consensus. We talked earlier about how he's one of the worst picks in round 2 of startups. So, yeah, I guess I just want to throw it over to you guys. Anything you have to add on the Bobby Slowik and Devon Achane marriage and what it means for his dynasty value?
Bobby Slowik is unbearable. Unbearable. I can't believe that we have to watch this guy again. I just listening to your rant like brought me back. I went and I was searching up my old tweets like about PFF Bobby from back in the day because like it just brought me back to watching that year 2 Stroud team where basically all I did every Sunday was just log into twitter.com and just fire off hate tweets about Bobby Slowik, running it on 2nd and 10 every single time. He's the worst. I apologize to Zach Robinson for denigrating him by comparing him to Bobby Slowik because no one does it like PFF Bobby. But there's a cost at which I'm willing to just be like, look, Devon Achane is awesome at football, and I'll deal with it, even if I think everything around him is a disaster. I'm basically there in redraft. He's fallen from being a late first to now being a mid-second, and I'm fine paying that, I think. He's not there yet in Dynasty, probably just a less like reactive market. But I think he might be there silently because I tried to shop Achane a few times and a lot of people were not very interested, and I've had other people reach out that were clearly trying to shop Achane and they were trying to get like the iron price and I wasn't wanting to pay it, but I do think that maybe that market lag catches up faster than we think or can be like realized in aggregated data if you get out there in the real world and you talk to the human beings. So that's where, I mean, everything that you said, I 100% agree with. I don't really have anything to add. Like, but Bobby Slowik's going to run when he shouldn't. He's going to run when he should. He's going to run when he should or shouldn't. And then he's going to be like, oh man, like it's just a constant feedback loop of banging your head into a wall because he runs the ball every single time on first down and second down. And then sure enough, they don't complete a pass on third down because it's 3rd and 9. And then he goes, oh my God, I can't trust my pass game. I better run it again on 1st and 2nd down. And it's like, if you would just call a pass play when they think you're running one time, maybe you'd have a little bit more success in your passing game. So yeah, I just keep looking at this team and I think it's going to look really similar to the Jets last year, where it's like the rate stats for Achane might look good. And like, if I was to do projections, right? Like whatever the median play number is in the NFL, it's usually about 62. Like you can really only project teams for between like 59 and 65 plays per game if you're trying to like have reasonable regression baked in. And I expect Achane's like target share in neutral-ish game scripts to look so good that he probably looks pretty decent on a projection. I just think what you can't bake into a projection is like the amount of games that I foresee in which the Dolphins are just completely uncompetitive. Because there were games like this with Breece Hall last year where you're like, oh, like he has a 23% target share, and he's like running pretty effectively because they have, Fields drawing guys. And it's like, if you just watch the Jets drives, it's like, oh, like Breece seems pretty involved. But like every successful drive this team has is going to take a million years because they're going to play so slow and they're going to run so much that the clock is going to be taking 45 seconds for every play. And so they're going to have like a 13-play field goal drive that takes 9 minutes off the clock. And Achane looks good the whole time. He gets 4.1 points. Their defense stinks, so they're not getting the ball back until it's 12 minutes left in the second quarter. They're going to go 3 and out. They're not going to see the ball again until it's 5 minutes left in the second quarter. And then all of a sudden, in the middle of the third quarter, you're like, Achane's had a pretty nice game today, hasn't he? Well, he has 7 fantasy points, and now they're down by 21, and they just went 3 and out, and they pulled him. And it's like, yeah, like you can't really like bake that into a median projection, but there's just going to be so many games like that where it's like the Dolphins ran 44 plays today, and 11 of them were in garbage time. So like Achane touched the ball on 48% of their offensive snaps. That was 11 carries, 4 targets, and no touchdowns. Better luck next week. Like, because that's what it was with Hall last year. And Achane's better than him, better pass catcher, but like I think you're just gonna have similar, like unprojectable levels of putridity.
Yeah, he's gonna have to be so special he transcends all of Slowik's missteps, I guess. And
he will.
My
some
question
games.
is,
Like some games he's just gonna take 175 yards to the house and it's gonna be fine.
Yeah,
but
and then
he
he's
can't do
benched.
that every game.
Then he's benched because Slowik says he scored too quick and they didn't run enough time off the clock. Like that's the level of hilarity we're probably going to run into.
Also, like Slowik's gonna love Ollie Gordon. Like I just know he's gonna love Ollie Gordon.
That's another angle that I didn't mention, but Achane over his career has kind of this was just like a thing that I constantly remember like tracking every single week. Is the goal line touches and the goal line roll, right? Like he's kind of had to fend off Ollie Gordon and Raheem Mostert and all these like random different guys at different points over the past couple years, like to get like a decent goal line share. And he's still not even close to the top of the top running backs at the goal line in terms of opportunity share, right? You add just like a 40% of the carries to Malik Willis inside the 10-yard line off the top of that. Like it just makes me extremely nervous. Right. I do think for the reasons that you laid out, Jacob, maybe Achane is like a way better best ball pick than he is a managed pick. Just because, like, yeah, you're going to get the spike weeks that if he averages out to being the RB9 or something on a per game basis, right, and you get the spike weeks where he takes 175 yards to the house and you don't have to worry about the 6-point stinkers when the Dolphins are uncompetitive, that might be better as opposed to the feeling you're going to have when you're putting him in your managed lineup every single week and he's disappointing you time after time.
Yeah, especially on drafters. Like where it's not a sprint at the end, because that's the other thing that I fear with Achane. It's like, what if they're 2-14 and he's not like playing, or it's like, well, we're nominally starting him, but we want to see what we have in Ollie Gordon in the second half because the season is toast and we're trying to get the number 1 pick, and so we're not going to play Achane, as much as we would if we were trying to win. Like all just the systemic risk on this team is huge, and I think that the huge cost in Dynasty is tough to pay.
Yep. All right. That's enough depressing talk on Devon Achane. Let's move on to another kind of negative take I have, but maybe I'll get some pushback on this one. Jackson Dart and Matt Nagy as the play caller for the Giants just has me really nervous about Dart. In redraft, it's kind of whatever. I don't care that much about quarterback risk in redraft. But yeah, in dynasty startups where he's an early third in ADP, going ahead of guys like Trevor Lawrence, Bo Nix, Brock Purdy, like really productive real life NFL quarterbacks that are going to continue to be starters in the league and have like no job security concerns really. I get a little bit worried about what this Giants season is going to look like and what's going to happen at the end of it if Dart is not continually super productive. So for the people unaware, Matt Nagy is my pick for the worst play caller in the NFL right now that's going to be employed for 2026. The last 2 times he got to call plays, he gave up those duties within like 6 weeks. The offense got better both times that he did that. He ruined Patrick Mahomes. Even without Tyreek Hill, Mahomes was one of the most efficient quarterbacks in the NFL on a drop back basis in 2022. The moment that Nagy was the OC again in 2023 on, he's been like 20th in adjusted net yards per attempt. And probably most concerningly for Jackson Dart and his fantasy prospects specifically, neither Mitch Trubisky nor Justin Fields across 4 seasons under Nagy ever had more than 3 rushing touchdowns, which is pretty crazy for Justin Fields especially. Had a career low 7% carry share inside the 5 under Nagy in 2021. David Montgomery just got the ball every time at the goal line that year. Every other season of his career, Fields
season, like, do you remember the quotes? I'm sorry, I'm interrupting you. It takes me back to that Justin Fields season, which was like one of the most insane things I can ever recall, where it's like, it was an all-time do you know who you drafted situation where like every week it was like, well, we want him to like master the West Coast offense. It was like, are you fucking high? Like, what are we doing here? Like you drafted Justin Fields and you're like going to make him run like Hank and you're calling 0 designed rushes. Like it was one of the most baffling seasons I've ever watched of play calling. And like the pressers, like they were legitimately like I'm seeing a lot of Andy Dalton and Justin Fields. It's like, what are we doing here? I mean, that probably ruined his career. We're never saving Justin Fields now, but I like kind of still think if he didn't get stuck with Matt Nagy that rookie year, who just tried to like shove him into the most like square peg round hole I've ever seen, like I think his career could have gone like fundamentally pretty differently.
That reflects on what you were saying about Patrick Mahomes too, who's came in and was known for being this electric all-time, possibly greatest toolsy quarterback of all time. He's so creative, the no-look, flip it over the shoulder, off the ground, Madden throw, and now he's just this redundant check-down artist and that doesn't create. I think that perfectly describes what Ryan was talking about.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you cutting in there because that was like color commentary that this absolutely needed. So I'm glad we got that. You are so right. I had like forgotten my visceral experience of that season, but that just brought it rushing back. Yeah, that's what it was. That's Matt Nagy. That's how he used Justin Fields. Fields, that year, 7% of the carries inside the 5-yard line for the team. Every other year of his career, he was over 40%, like Justin Fields obviously should be. I don't know why are we expecting this to be better for Jackson Dart? And even if, yes, I understand like Harbaugh is going to have some more control, maybe Nagy's a short leash, but like if we're having to make the argument of like, okay, maybe he won't.
They got a lot of OCs on that staff. It might be shorter than you think.
They do. They have
like 17 different candidates to be interim OC.
I was just going to say, don't worry. He's on such a short leash just so he can get Greg Roman back in calling plays.
Yes.
Get ready, because in 2 minutes I'm about to make the whole pro Greg Roman case.
Oh,
I'm ready.
Let's make the pro Greg Roman case over the pro Brian Callahan case, who is the other potential interim OC that's on this coaching staff. Yeah, it's like if we're literally talking about who's the interim OC going to be, like should Jackson Dart really have a round 3 startup ADP? Is that really what we want to do on this offense? It's completely devoid of weapons, completely devoid of any players other than Malik Neighbors that can make his life easier, who is very likely going to start the season on PUP.
That's fine,
the Giants
Nagy will be
are
fired before Neighbors comes back.
Yes, but even if that's the case, if the Giants are 1-7 and completely hopeless when Neighbors is like healthy enough to come back, is Malik Neighbors actually coming back, or is he not just gonna pull a Jamar Chase and say, I'm gonna sit the rest of this season out. I don't want to injure myself again. I'll be back in 2027. Like, if the Giants season goes poorly enough, I think that's a world we could live in. So I don't know. It's terrifying to me to hold a round 3 startup ADP Jackson Dart right now.
I have no real angle on this because I'm like conflicted in many respects. I think that probably what Ryan is saying is the right analytical take, which is that the situation is pretty dire, the downside risk is pretty extreme, and the price is really high. So it's probably you're better off selling than buying. I think, like, if you're searching for optimism in this coaching staff, like, there's none with Matt Nagy. He's terrible. I've always, probably the biggest thing I've respected about Jim Harbaugh over the course of his 10 years as head coach is I feel like he's always hired pretty well. Like, I feel like he's made a lot of, like, interesting hiring choices, and he's cut bait at the right time, and he's, like, felt like he's usually had his finger on the pulse. Like, even the ones that didn't work out, I always thought were interesting and, like, thoughtful. Like, I thought that Tressman, who was a disaster as an OC, but I thought that was like an interesting move. I thought that he, coming off of his tenure with the Bears, I thought he did some cool things, brought a lot from the CFL, clearly didn't have the makeup to be a head coach. I was like, that makes sense. Didn't work out. He moved on quick. He at times leaned into like Gary Kubiak and getting some of the Shanahan stuff. When they went and got Lamar Jackson, like, I know Tom eventually grew to hate Greg Roman, but like the offense that Greg Roman put in early on in Lamar Jackson's career was like genuinely innovative, and I think he was the perfect coach for that time. And when he became not the right coach, they eventually moved on, and they got Todd Monken, who I thought was a home run hire. And similarly on defense, like, obviously the track record is not perfect, but like Mike McDonald was a John Harbaugh guy. And they've had, I think, interesting hires on that side of the ball. So I'm usually a pretty pro Harbaugh dude. And I was just floored that Matt Nagy was the ultimate choice. Like, how you can take this guy of all of the options was astonishing to me. If I have any room for optimism, it's that, like, I feel like that they've built such an, not overqualified in terms of skill, but like overqualified in terms of experience level, like overall offensive staff, that I'm kind of viewing this to be like an offensive coordinator by committee situation. They have Callahan, as we mentioned, as the pass game coordinator. Roman's the run game coordinator. These are 3 former OCs, 2 former head coaches. And I view it as like the run game design and a lot of the RPO and option stuff, which is what hopefully is what we want for Jackson Dart. That's going to be Roman's domain. He's going to design all that. And then Callahan's going to design most of the passing game. And I think Nagy's just going to be like the very literal play caller. And like, if that's what happens, I'm okay with it. Like, I think Callahan was like a totally fine offensive assistant on the Bengals. Like, by all accounts, he was like a pretty helpful member of that staff. Their passing game was wildly successful. I mean, with and without him, but I don't think he did anything offensive in that capacity. I think his issue as a head coach is like he is like not a people person, and he was like in way over his head as like a leader. But like as a member of an offensive staff, I think he's fine. People hate Greg Roman. I still think he's one of the best run game designers in the NFL. As like a run game coordinator, I have no problem with that hire. I think all 32 NFL teams should be interested in hiring Greg Roman as a run game coordinator. So like the Nagy thing is awful. I just think he's set up in a position that maybe his associates do most of the heavy lifting for him. And then the thing with Jackson Dart that's weird is like the big NFL media has just always been so out on this guy. And I think that they're wrong. Like, I like this guy as a prospect. I still like this guy. I thought he was really impressive as a rookie. And I really want to bet against, like, all of these Jackson Dart haters. It just seems that none of them play Dynasty because the Dynasty market doesn't reflect any of the Jackson Dart pessimism that you constantly see out there in the world. To the point that, like, I almost want to shade in some of that pessimism that I don't even believe, because it's like a little scary that if you like leave the dynasty bubble and you listen to like the Athletic Football Show, like those types of sources for content, like they are not sold on a Jackson Dart being the answer after this year. They view him, more precariously than like a Cam Ward, which I think is weird. But like, if that's how he's viewed by most football people, that's probably how he's viewed by John Harbaugh. And so like it does make me very, very nervous to invest in him. I'm so torn because I really believe in him and I want to bet on him. The price makes it really tough.
Man, Greg Roman is really good early on. Just expect nothing to change. And you're right. He's like, I did love Greg Roman and what he did in 2019, even in the end of 2018. He's the reason they got where they got in 2018. And he's part of the big reason why 2019 happened. Unfortunately, nothing changed in 20 and 21, and nothing does change with him. He's the type of coordinator that will practice one special run at practice every day, all week, plan nothing else. But man, when that one play runs and they never run it again, it's going to look awesome. All this tells me is to spy Scatterbo. If this is going to just be the Kareem Hunt at the 5-yard line, I'll take that. But I think there's reason to have pessimism with Jackson Dart beyond just even his ability to stay healthy in his running style. That matters.
The biggest reason I'm pessimistic is just the neighbors stuff. Like if he's missing time and if he comes back and he's not a superstar, this situation is horrible. I mean, Dart did a great job of mitigating it last year, I think, with better coaching. But like, there's a range of outcomes where they either have potentially, like, it's possible the Giants by the end of the year we could say they have the best wide receiver in the entire NFL. Or they could have the worst wide receiver room in the entire NFL if Neighbors is playing at half health, because no one else on this team is doing anything.
Yeah, fully agree. The Neighbors stuff is also kind of where I stop. I hear you on Scatterbo as well, Tom. I think maybe in Dynasty I'm a little more perceptive to that case, but also it's just like, do I really want the running back on this offense that I am projecting to be like bottom 2 in the league, maybe next to the Dolphins? So yeah, I don't know. I just have a really hard time with all of them, with everything going on here. But that's all I got. So yeah, unless you got anything else for us here, Tom, you can take us out of here or wrap a bow on this any way you'd like to.
If you liked what you saw today, please like and subscribe to the channel. It helps us in more ways than you can know. And leave a comment. An hour and 10 plus may seem like a long time to really focus in on 5 players, but we go in depth in ways that most channels just don't when they're telling you to make better informed decisions. So let us know if you like this kind of content, what we missed, what you didn't. Were we too harsh on some of these play callers? I don't know. Link for Ryan's article is going to be in the description. Make sure you're subscribed to catch that. You're not going to want to miss it. So many great things. And if you're watching this and didn't watch the live, we went live yesterday. Go back and catch that. See if either one of these guys can take down 5 for 5. And of course, get all of the in-depth analysis that we provide on the other show that does go live. Until then, till next week, anyway, remember that clear eyes and full hearts can never lose, and that your best days are always spent tilting. We'll see you guys next time.